On a quiet April evening, the Hudson River looked calm, almost serene. Its waters shimmered beneath the fading light, hiding secrets that only time would reveal. To most, it was a place of beauty, a river that carried history, romance, and countless stories along its banks. But on that night in 2015, the Hudson would carry something darker, something that would ignite headlines, courtroom battles, and endless debates about love, betrayal, and the thin line between accident and murder. This is the story of Angelica and Vincent, two people who seem to have found passion, freedom, and adventure in each other, only to end up at the center of one of the most chilling cases to ever unfold on the Hudson. Vincent Viafor was a man people admired. He was 46, broad-shouldered, with an easy smile and a love for the outdoors. Friends described him as adventurous, generous, and always ready for fun. He loved his toys, fast cars, motorcycles, and most of all, his kayak. The Hudson River was his playground, and he spent countless hours exploring its currents and islands. To those who knew him, Vincent was a man full of life, someone who had lived freely and fully, and someone who seemed invincible against the odds of nature. Then came Angelica Griswold. Born in Latvia, she arrived in America with big dreams, a creative soul, and a free spirit. She was artistic, drawn to photography and dance, and she had a passion for yoga and the outdoors. Angelica had a kind of energy that made people notice her, a spark, a desire to explore, to live without boundaries. When Vincent met her, he was captivated. She wasn't just another companion. She was different, mysterious, adventurous, wild in a way that matched his own love for excitement. They met, fell fast, and within months, they moved in together. For friends, it was almost too quick, but for Vincent and Angelica, it felt right. They laughed together, traveled, and shared countless photos on social media, showing the world their adventures. To outsiders, it looked like a love story unfolding in real time. Two people swept up by passion, ready to take on life together. But love stories often have shadows, and behind their smiles, not everything was perfect. Angelica was younger, restless, and sometimes struggled with Vincent's controlling ways. Vincent, according to some accounts, could be dominant, expecting things his way. Angelica confided in friends that she sometimes felt suffocated, that the life she thought she wanted was not always the one she had. Yet at the same time, she seemed devoted, always posting photos of him, calling him her love, and sharing their adventures with the world. Then came that fateful day, April 19, 2015. It was chilly, the Hudson's waters still frigid from winter's hold. Vincent wanted to kayak that evening, to paddle out to Bannerman's Island, a mysterious old fortress that had long been abandoned, sitting like a ghostly castle in the middle of the river. Angelica joined him. For her, the adventure was irresistible. For him, it was routine, a trip he'd done countless times. They set off, each in their own kayak. The river stretched wide and dark, the currents stronger than they seemed. To anyone else, the conditions would have been intimidating, maybe even dangerous. But Vincent, confident as always, pressed on. Angelica followed, her small frame slicing through the water, camera in hand, eager to capture the beauty of the moment. But as night fell, everything changed. The river grew colder, the wind stronger. Out there, in the middle of the Hudson, Vincent's kayak capsized. In a moment of chaos, he was thrown into the icy water. He struggled, fighting to stay afloat, but without a life jacket, the river became a deadly trap. Angelica watched, horrified. At least, that was her account. She called 911, her voice frantic, telling dispatchers that her fiancé had fallen into the river, that she couldn't see him anymore. Rescue boats searched, helicopters scanned the water, but Vincent was gone. The Hudson had swallowed him whole. For 34 days, his body remained missing. The river carried him until finally, weeks later, he was discovered downstream. The official cause, drowning. At first, it seemed like nothing more than a tragic accident. A man who loved adventure, who knew the risks, lost to the power of nature. But then, suspicion began to creep in. And it all started with Angelica. In the days after Vincent's disappearance, Angelica didn't behave like the grieving fiancé people expected. Instead of retreating into sorrow, she posted photos on social media. She was seen drinking, laughing, even doing cartwheels on the grass. To investigators, it was a red flag. Who celebrates when their fiancé has just drowned? Who posts selfies when their partner's body is still missing? And then came her statements. When police brought her in for questioning, Angelica seemed different. At times, she cried. At times, she laughed. Her moods shifted, her answers conflicted. And then, in a moment that would change everything, investigators said she confessed. They claimed Angelica admitted to tampering with the kayak, removing a small plug that allowed water to seep in, making it less stable. They said she removed the paddle's O-ring, making it harder for Vincent to steer. They said she told them she wanted him gone, that she felt trapped in the relationship, and that she saw his death as a kind of release. To prosecutors, it was the smoking gun. Angelica hadn't just lost her fiancé, she had killed him. But Angelica's defense told a different story. They argued that her so-called confession was twisted, taken out of context, and coerced during an exhausting 11-hour interrogation. They said the island confession, where police claimed she admitted her actions during a walk on Bannerman's Island, never actually happened. There was no recording, no written statement, just the officer's word. And as for the kayak, they argued Vincent often removed the plug himself, using the hole to tie things down. It wasn't sabotage, it was routine. Yet the prosecution had one more angle: money. Vincent had a $500,000 life insurance policy, and Angelica was the beneficiary of part of it. To them, it was motive, freedom, money, and the end of a controlling relationship. The case became a media frenzy. Headlines branded her the Kayak Killer. Talk shows debated whether she was a cold-blooded murderer or a misunderstood woman trapped in a toxic relationship. Every smile she showed on social media became fuel for the argument that she was heartless. Every tear she shed was questioned, real or fake. In court, the battle raged. The prosecution painted her as manipulative, calculating, and dangerous. The defense described her as vulnerable, pressured, and grieving in her own way. Experts debated the kayak, the currents, the missing plug. Friends were split. Some said Angelica adored Vincent. Others said she was desperate to escape. And through it all, the question remained: was this a tragic accident, or had Angelica played a deadly hand in Vincent's drowning? Eventually, the trial reached its climax. Angelica struck a deal, pleading guilty to a lesser charge of criminally negligent homicide. She admitted she had contributed to Vincent's death, but stopped short of saying she intended to kill him. For that, she was sentenced to prison, though with credit for time served. She would walk free sooner than many expected. When she finally did, Angelica returned to a world that had already judged her. To some, she would forever be the Kayak Killer. To others, she was a victim herself, of love gone wrong, of media frenzy, of a justice system eager for a confession. Even now, years later, the case haunts the Hudson River. People still debate what really happened that night. Did Angelica plan it? Did she watch and let him drown? Or was it simply what the river does sometimes? Take lives without warning, leaving the living to carry the blame? What we know for certain is that 2 lives were destroyed on that cold April evening. Vincent lost his to the currents, and Angelica, guilty or not, lost hers to suspicion, headlines, and the weight of a story too unbelievable to ignore. And maybe that's why this case still captivates us. Because it forces us to ask questions we don't want to answer. About love. About control. About freedom. About how thin the line is between passion and destruction. When we see Angelica's smile in those photos, was it the smile of a woman free at last? Or just someone trying to mask grief the only way she knew how? When we picture Vincent fighting in the icy waters, was it fate? Or was someone watching who could have done more? We may never know. The Hudson River keeps its secrets well. But stories like this remind us that behind every perfect-looking couple, behind every smiling photo, there can be shadows darker than we imagine. And as the sun sets on the Hudson, casting its golden light over the rippling water, one can't help but think back to that night. A kayak overturned, a man lost, a woman accused. Love turned into tragedy, tragedy into suspicion, and suspicion into a story that still leaves us wondering where the truth really lies. This is not just a story of a drowning on the Hudson. It's a story of passion, freedom, control, and the choices we make in moments of desperation. It's a story that shows how quickly life can turn, and how love, when twisted by fear or frustration, can lead to unthinkable ends. So as you leave this story behind, ask yourself, if love can bring us to the highest peaks of happiness, can it also push us into the darkest depths of the river? And if it can, how do we ever really know the person sitting across from us, smiling, paddling side by side, on the calm waters of life? The Hudson River doesn't give answers. It only carries the echoes of that night, whispers of what happened, and the silence of a man who never came back. And somewhere in that silence, we're left to decide for ourselves. Was it murder, or was it the river?